Riley Hayes stepped off the transport shuttle onto Zirion 7's rust-colored surface and immediately understood why 3 previous colonization attempts had ended in complete disaster. The air tasted like copper and ozone, the gravity was just heavy enough to make every movement feel sluggish, and something in the distance was making a sound that fell somewhere between a howl and industrial machinery failing catastrophically. "Welcome to paradise," muttered Sergeant Collins, the grizzled veteran who'd been assigned as Riley's military attaché. "Hope you brought your will, sir, because this place has a 100% casualty rate for optimism." Riley adjusted his environmental suit and checked the readings on his wrist display. Atmospheric composition was breathable but not pleasant, local wildlife registered as extremely hostile, and the weather prediction system had apparently given up and was just displaying a continuous warning symbol. "Cheerful place. Any word from our Kithera neighbors? They've been quiet for the past week, which either means they're planning something or they're all dead. Personally, I'm hoping for dead." "That's not very diplomatic, Sergeant. Diplomacy doesn't work real well with species that communicate primarily through acts of violence, sir." Riley surveyed the human outpost, a collection of prefabricated structures that looked like they'd been assembled by committee and then attacked by something with very large claws. Scorch marks decorated most surfaces, and several buildings showed signs of what could charitably be called aggressive renovation. "Brief me on the Kithera situation." Collins pulled up a holographic display showing the local area. "They're about 10 kilometers northwest of here. Bipedal, roughly human-sized but with enhanced reflexes and what our xenobiologists call pronounced predatory adaptations. They've been systematically destroying our equipment, sabotaging our supply lines, and generally making life miserable for anyone who ventures outside the perimeter." "Casualties?" "Surprisingly few. That's what's weird about it. They seem more interested in breaking our stuff than breaking our people. Almost like they're sending a message." Riley studied the tactical display, noting the pattern of Kithera attacks. There was definitely a structure to their activities, almost like they were following some kind of protocol. "What's our current defensive posture?" "Bunker down and hope they get bored. Earth Command's official position is minimal engagement until we can establish our foothold." "And how's that working out?" "About as well as you'd expect. We're down to basic rations, half our equipment is sabotage, and morale is somewhere below sea level." Riley walked to the edge of the compound, looking out over the alien landscape. Zirion 7 was undeniably hostile, but there was something magnificent about its harsh beauty. The problem wasn't the planet, it was the approach. "Sergeant, what do you know about Kithera's social structure?" "They're organized into warrior clans, highly territorial, and apparently allergic to sharing." "Why?" "Because I don't think they're trying to drive us away. I think they're testing us." Collins stared at him. "Testing us for what?" "Worthiness. Think about it, they could have killed us all by now if they wanted to. Instead, they're systematically undermining our infrastructure while keeping casualties minimal. That's not genocide, that's evaluation. With respect, sir, that's a pretty big assumption to base our survival on." "Maybe. But the alternative is spending the next 6 months hiding in bunkers while they slowly dismantle everything we've built." A loud alarm began sounding from the compound's perimeter sensors. Collins immediately pulled up the security feeds, showing a group of figures approaching from the northwest. "Kithera patrol, about 15 of them. They're heading straight for the main gate." Riley could see them on the display, tall, graceful figures moving with predatory precision across the rough terrain. Even through the low-resolution feed, their alien nature was apparent in the way they moved, too fluid and coordinated for human physiology. "Standard protocol is to seal the compound and wait for them to leave," Collins said. "Not today. I'm going out to meet them." "Sir, that's suicide. That's diplomacy. If I'm right about this being a test, hiding behind walls is exactly the wrong response." Riley checked his sidearm and headed for the main gate. Collins followed, muttering what sounded like prayers or profanity. "At least take backup." "No. If this is about proving courage, showing up with an army defeats the purpose. Riley walked through the compound's main gate and across the open ground toward the approaching Kithra. As they got closer, he could see them more clearly, definitely humanoid, but with elongated limbs, angular features, and ears that swept back from their heads in elegant points. Their clothing appeared to be some kind of advanced fabric that shifted color with their movements. The lead figure stopped about 10 meters away and spoke in a voice that carried clearly across the distance. Human leader. You approach without weapons drawn. I come in peace. I'm Captain Riley Hayes, military liaison for the human colony. I am Vera of the Northern Clans. You are either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. I'd like to discuss the situation between our peoples. The situation is simple. Your people fail every test we give them. Soon, we will recommend that you leave our world. What kind of tests? Vera tilted her head, studying him with predatory intensity. Tests of courage. Tests of wisdom. Tests of honor. Your predecessors failed them all. Maybe they didn't understand what was being tested. Perhaps. You seem different from the others. Riley noticed that the other Kithra had spread out in a loose circle around them, but their weapons remained holstered. Definitely a test, not an ambush. I'd like to propose something. A way for both our species to coexist on this world. Speak. Joint operations. Instead of testing each other's resolve through conflict, we work together to survive this planet's challenges. Zirian 7 doesn't care about our politics, it's trying to kill all of us equally. Vera's expression shifted slightly, and Riley caught what might have been amusement. You would trust your survival to alien warriors? I'd trust it to anyone competent enough to keep sabotaging our equipment without getting caught. That was definitely amusement. You speak strangely for a military leader. I prefer practical solutions to traditional ones. Before Vera could respond, the ground began to vibrate with a low, ominous rumble. All the Kithra immediately shifted to high alert, weapons appearing in their hands with fluid grace. Seismic event, Vera said. Category 7 or higher. Riley felt the rumble intensifying. How bad is Category 7? Bad enough to flatten both our settlements. Riley made a decision that would either save lives or get him killed. Emergency Cooperation Protocol. Your people and mine, working together to survive whatever's coming. You would risk human lives to save Kithra. I would risk everything to save everyone. Vera stared at him for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then she smiled, revealing teeth that were definitely sharper than human normal. Perhaps you are different. Very well, human captain. Let us see if you can lead both species through disaster. The rumble intensified, and Riley realized he was about to find out whether courage was enough to tame a savage planet. The earthquake turned out to be the opening act for something much worse. As Riley coordinated the joint evacuation efforts between human and Kithra settlements, seismic sensors registered massive underground movements heading toward both communities. What emerged from the planet's depths made Riley understand why Zirian 7 had such an impressive reputation for eating colonists. Those are not in any of our xenobiology databases, Collins said, staring at the creatures approaching from the south. They move like a cross between giant spiders and armored tanks, each one roughly the size of a small building and apparently very unhappy about being awakened. Kithra designation is deep sleepers, Vera said, studying the tactical displays in the Human Command Center. They emerge during major seismic events. Very territorial. Very hungry. How do you usually deal with them? We don't. We evacuate and wait for them to return to the deep places. Riley watched the sensor readings as more creatures emerged from fissures across the landscape. How long does that usually take? Months. Sometimes years. That's not going to work for either of our communities this time. The joint evacuation had been a remarkable success, both human and Kithra civilians were now housed in a temporary shelter complex that Riley had improvised using human engineering and Kithra knowledge of local terrain. But the deep sleepers were heading directly for the shelter, apparently attracted by the concentrated life signs. "Captain," Vera said quietly, "my people are impressed with your leadership during the crisis. But this situation requires more than courage." "What does it require?" "Sacrifice." The traditional Kithra response would be to offer the creatures a smaller target to protect the larger community. Riley turned to face her fully. "You're talking about sacrificing some of your people to save the rest. It is the practical solution. It's also completely unacceptable. Then what do you propose?" Riley studied the tactical display, looking for options that didn't involve anyone getting eaten by giant spider tanks. "We fight them." "With what?" "Our combined military forces are designed for skirmishes, not battling creatures that can level buildings." "Then we get creative." Riley called for a joint planning session, bringing together the senior staff from both communities. The Kithra warriors were skeptical about taking orders from a human, while the human military personnel were equally uncomfortable with alien integration. But the approaching deep sleepers made philosophical differences seem less important. "The creatures are attracted to large concentrations of life signs," Riley explained. "But they're also territorial. If we can convince them that this area belongs to something bigger and more dangerous than they are, they might retreat." "How do we do that?" asked Commander Torres, the senior human officer. "Controlled explosions to simulate a larger predator's territorial markings, combined with high-frequency transmissions that mimic aggressive creature calls." Vera studied the proposal. This would require precise coordination between human technology and Kithra knowledge of creature behavior. Can it work? Perhaps. But it would require someone to place the charges manually. The creature's electromagnetic fields interfere with remote detonation. "I'll do it," Riley said immediately. "No," Vera said firmly. "This requires knowledge of creature behavior patterns that humans do not possess." "Then we go together." The room fell silent. Joint human-Kithra operations were one thing, but a two-person mission into deep sleeper territory was something else entirely. "Captain," Colin said carefully, "that's suicide. So is sitting here waiting for them to arrive." Vera nodded slowly. "I accept the proposal. But understand, if we fail, both our peoples will likely perish. If we don't try, they'll definitely perish." The mission preparation took 4 hours, during which Riley got a crash course in Kithra military technology and creature behavior analysis. Vera, meanwhile, studied human tactical protocols and explosive placement techniques. By the time they were ready to deploy, both species had contributed to a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. "The charges need to be placed in a specific pattern around the creature's approach route," Vera explained as they prepared to leave the shelter. "We have approximately 6 hours before they reach the settlement. And if the territorial deception doesn't work, then we improvise." Riley shouldered the pack containing the human explosive devices, while Vera carried the Kithra sonic transmitters. "Any advice for not getting eaten by giant alien spiders?" "Don't smell like prey." That's remarkably unhelpful. Most survival advice is. They left the shelter complex and headed into the hostile terrain between the deep sleepers and the settlement. Riley quickly discovered that moving across Zirian 7's landscape with a Kithra warrior was like trying to keep up with a predatory ballet dancer. Vera moved with fluid precision that made every step look effortless, while Riley struggled not to trip over the uneven ground. "You move loudly," Vera observed after an hour of travel. "I move human ly. We're not exactly designed for stealth. Your species compensates with technology and determination. Is that your way of saying we're stubborn and over-equipped?" "Among other things." They reached the first placement point just as the lead deep sleeper came into view. The creature was even more terrifying up close, a nightmare combination of arthropod and siege engine, with legs that could crush vehicles and sensory organs that tracked their movement with unnerving accuracy. Placement needs to be precise, Vera whispered. The charge must detonate at the moment the creature passes the territorial marker. Riley armed the explosive and set the timer. How do you know so much about these things? I lost someone to them, years ago. Learning their behavior patterns was therapeutic. I'm sorry. He died because humans were mining in the deep places, awakening creatures that should have remained sleeping. I have not been favorably inclined toward your species. And now? Now I am working with a human to save both our peoples. Life is complex. They moved to the second placement point, where another deep sleeper was approaching from a different angle. This one was larger than the first, with additional armor plating that suggested it was older and more experienced. Alpha male, Vera said. If our deception works on him, the others will follow his lead. And if it doesn't work? We become very small meals for very large creatures. Riley placed the second charge, noting that his hands were steadier than he'd expected. Something about Vera's calm competence was reassuring, even in the face of almost certain death. Vera, can I ask you something? Now. It seems like an appropriate time for personal questions. What do you wish to know? Why are you helping me? Your people could have let the deep sleepers eliminate the human settlement and solved their problem permanently. Vera paused in her movement, considering the question. Because you are the first human leader to treat Kithra as equals rather than obstacles. That deserves recognition. Even if it goes against your people's interests. My people's interests include understanding whether humans can be trusted partners or only temporary neighbors. You are providing valuable data. Riley finished arming the third charge. So this is still a test. Everything is a test, Captain. The question is whether you choose to pass or fail. The sonic transmitters activated on schedule, filling the air with frequencies that made Riley's teeth ache but seemed to communicate something meaningful to the deep sleepers. For a tense moment, the creatures paused in their advance, their sensory organs twitching as they processed the artificial territorial signals. Then the first charge detonated, creating a crater pattern that apparently resembled the territorial markings of something even more dangerous than deep sleepers. The alpha male reared back, its legs scraping gouges in the rocky ground, then turned and began retreating toward the deep places. The other creatures followed, their territorial instincts satisfied that this area belonged to a superior predator. It worked, Riley said, hardly believing it. For now. But they will remember this area as dangerous. Both our peoples will need to relocate. Together. Vera looked at him with an expression that might have been respect. That would be unprecedented. Good. I like unprecedented. As they walked back toward the settlement, Riley realized that something fundamental had changed between them. The mission had been successful, but more importantly, it had proved that humans and Kithra could work together as equals. Vera, he said as the shelter complex came into view, what happens now? Now we discover whether courage is sufficient to overcome centuries of mutual distrust. And if it isn't? Then we find something stronger than courage. Riley looked at her, noting the way she moved with new confidence, as if the mission had proved something to herself as well as to him. What's stronger than courage? Partnership. The success of the deep sleeper operation created immediate political complications that Riley hadn't anticipated. Within 24 hours of their return, both communities were dealing with internal conflicts about the unprecedented level of human-Kithra cooperation. Riley found himself defending his decisions to Earth Command via quantum communicator, while Vera faced similar challenges from the Kithra Council. Captain Hayes, came the stern voice of Admiral Morrison through the comm link, your unauthorized joint operations have created a diplomatic incident. Earth Command specifically instructed minimal engagement with indigenous species. With respect, sir, minimal engagement would have resulted in maximum casualties for both species. That's not the point. You've exceeded your authority and established protocols that haven't been approved by xenopolitical committees. Riley looked around the temporary command center, where human and Kithra personnel were working side by side to plan the permanent relocation. "Sir, the protocols are working. We've achieved more cooperation in 3 days than previous missions accomplished in months." "Cooperation isn't the objective, Captain. Establishing human presence is the objective." "What if I told you that cooperation might be the key to establishing permanent human presence?" There was a long pause on the comm link. "Explain." Riley gestured to Vera, who was studying engineering schematics with Commander Torres. "The Kithra aren't just native species, Admiral. They're potential partners. Their knowledge of this planet, combined with human technology, could make Zirian-7 the most successful colony in this sector. And the political implications of interspecies partnerships are someone else's problem. My job is to establish successful human presence. I'm doing that." After the communication ended, Riley found Vera on the observation deck, staring out at the Zirian-7 landscape. The planet's twin suns were setting, casting the harsh terrain in shades of gold and crimson that almost made it look hospitable. "Difficult conversation with your superiors?" she asked without turning around. "They're concerned about the political implications of human-Kithra cooperation. As are mine. The northern clans are divided about whether our cooperation represents strength or weakness." Riley joined her at the railing. "What do you think?" "I think politics are irrelevant when survival is at stake." "Is that your official position or your personal opinion?" "Both, apparently." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the alien sunset. Riley had noticed that conversations with Vera often included these quiet moments, as if she processed information differently than humans. "Riley," she said finally, using his first name for the first time, "there is something you should know about Kithra culture." "What's that?" "We do not form partnerships lightly. When a Kithra commits to cooperation with another being, it is considered a bond that transcends political or social boundaries." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I am saying that our professional partnership has evolved beyond what either of our peoples would consider appropriate." Riley turned to face her fully. "And how do you feel about that?" "Confused. Intrigued. Concerned about the implications." "Those are remarkably human emotions. Perhaps emotions are more universal than either of our species realized." Before Riley could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the complex. Commander Torres' voice came over the communication system, "All personnel to emergency stations. We have incoming aircraft from both human and Kithra territories." Riley and Vera rushed to the command center, where tactical displays showed 2 separate flights approaching the settlement, one from Earth Command, the other from the Kithra territories. "Official delegations?" Riley asked. "Enforcement squads," Vera said grimly. "Both our governments have decided that our cooperation has gone too far. Can we refuse to meet with them? Not without making the situation worse." The first aircraft to land was human, a military transport carrying what appeared to be a full diplomatic team along with armed security personnel. The second was Kithra, a sleek craft that moved with the same fluid grace that characterized all their technology. "Captain Hayes," said the lead human diplomat, a stern woman in formal civilian attire, "I'm Director Chen from Earth Command's Xenopolitical Division. You're being relieved of command pending a full investigation of your unauthorized protocols." "On what grounds?" "Violation of first contact procedures, unauthorized technology sharing, and establishment of unauthorized interspecies agreements." From the Kithra delegation, an elderly warrior approached Vera. "Vera of the northern clans, you are commanded to return for council judgment. Your cooperation with humans has exceeded acceptable parameters." "By whose authority?" Vera asked. "The Combined Clans Council. Your actions have been deemed potentially treasonous." Riley stepped forward. "With respect to both delegations, this settlement is currently under emergency protocols. Any personnel changes or arrests will have to wait until the immediate survival situation is resolved." "What survival situation?" Director Chen asked. The one where both our communities need to relocate immediately because of deep sleeper territorial claims, and the only viable solution requires continued human-Kithra cooperation. That's no longer your concern, Captain. Actually, it is. Riley pulled up the tactical displays showing the current situation. I'm the only human officer with experience in joint operations, and Vera is the only Kithra warrior with detailed knowledge of the relocation requirements. Remove either of us, and both communities will likely face significant casualties. The human security personnel moved closer to Riley, while the Kithra warriors flanked Vera. Riley realized that the situation was about to escalate beyond diplomatic posturing. Director Chen, he said carefully, may I suggest a compromise? What kind of compromise? Give us 72 hours to complete the relocation operation. After that, I'll submit to whatever investigation Earth Command requires. And if we refuse? Riley gestured around the command center, where human and Kithra personnel continued working together despite the tension. Then you'll be responsible for explaining to both governments why their enforcement actions resulted in the failure of the most successful interspecies cooperation in colonial history. The Kithra elder spoke to Vera in their harmonic language, a conversation that sounded like music but felt like an argument. Finally, Vera responded in the same language, her tone firm and unyielding. What did you tell them? Riley asked. That I claim right of combat trial for my actions. Any Kithra who wishes to challenge my cooperation with humans must face me in personal combat. Is that legal? It's traditional. And it means they cannot arrest me without first defeating me. Director Chen looked between Riley and Vera with obvious frustration. This situation has become completely irregular. Welcome to frontier diplomacy, Riley said. Everything about this situation is irregular. 72 hours, Captain. After that, both of you will face the consequences of your actions. As the delegations departed, Riley realized that they had bought time but not a solution. Unless they could prove that human-Kithra cooperation was not just successful but essential, both their careers and the future of interspecies relations would be decided by politicians who had never faced a deep sleeper or coordinated a joint rescue operation. Vera, he said as they watched the aircraft disappear into the alien sky, any ideas for proving that partnership is stronger than politics? Perhaps. But it will require both of us to risk everything we have built. I'm getting used to that. Good. Because what I am proposing will either revolutionize interspecies relations or get us both exiled from our respective civilizations. Riley looked at her, noting the determined set of her shoulders and the way her elongated ears had shifted forward in what he'd learned was a sign of intense focus. What do you have in mind? Permanent integration. Not just cooperation, but actual unity between our communities. That's completely unprecedented. Everything we have done has been unprecedented. Fair point. How do we make it work? We prove that integrated communities are stronger than separate ones. We make our partnership the foundation for something neither species could achieve alone. Riley nodded slowly. And if it fails? Then we fail together. Which is still better than succeeding separately. The 72 hours that followed would later be remembered as the most intense period in the history of human-alien relations. Riley and Vera worked with desperate efficiency to not only complete the community relocation but to create something that had never existed before, a fully integrated human-Kithra settlement that operated as a single unified society. The residential areas need to accommodate both species' spatial requirements, Vera explained as they reviewed the settlement plans. Humans prefer enclosed spaces with defined boundaries. Kithra require elevated platforms with multiple exit routes. Can we design structures that serve both needs? If we integrate human engineering with Kithra architectural principles, yes. Riley studied the blueprints, marveling at how naturally their ideas seemed to complement each other. What about governance? Our political systems are completely different. We create a new system. Council representation from both species, with decisions requiring consensus rather than majority rule. That could lead to deadlock. Or it could lead to better decisions. Humans excel at long-term planning and systematic analysis. Kithra excel at rapid adaptation and intuitive problem-solving. By the end of the first day, they had a preliminary design for what they were calling the Unified Settlement, a community that incorporated the best elements of both species' social and technological capabilities. More importantly, they had proven that human and Kithra personnel could work together with remarkable efficiency when properly integrated. Captain, Commander Torres said as she reviewed the construction schedules, "This is incredible. We're building in 3 days what would normally take weeks. Kithra construction techniques. That, plus having workers who can communicate flawlessly and coordinate without traditional hierarchical delays." Riley noticed that human and Kithra personnel had naturally formed mixed teams, with each group contributing their strengths to shared objectives. It was exactly the kind of integration that Earth Command and the Kithra Council feared, but it was also undeniably effective. "Vera," he said during a brief break from planning, "I need to ask you something personal." "What do you wish to know? Why are you risking everything for this? Your people, your career, your place in Kithra society." Vera paused in her review of the defensive perimeter plans. "Because I have discovered something I did not expect to find. Which is that working with you has made me a better version of myself. Kithra culture values individual excellence, but partnership has shown me capabilities I did not know I possessed. Is that enough to justify the risks? Riley, 3 weeks ago I viewed humans as a necessary inconvenience to be tolerated. Today, I cannot imagine facing the challenges of this world without human partnership. If that is not worth fighting for, what is?" Before Riley could respond, the communication system activated with an emergency priority signal. "All senior personnel to the command center immediately. We have multiple incoming aircraft." Riley and Vera rushed to the command center, where the tactical displays showed a situation that made their previous diplomatic challenges look simple. Aircraft from both Earth Command and the Kithra territories were approaching, but they weren't alone. Additional signals indicated the presence of ships from other human colonies and what appeared to be representatives from multiple Kithra clan territories. "Sir," reported Sergeant Collins, "it looks like both our governments called in reinforcements." "Or observers," Vera said grimly. "This many representatives suggests that our situation has become a test case for broader interspecies policy." Director Chen's voice came over the communication system. "Captain Hayes, prepare for immediate inspection of your settlement operations. Multiple governmental and military observers will be conducting comprehensive evaluations." A Kithra voice followed, speaking in accented but clear human language. "Vera of the Northern Clans, the Combined Council has appointed review arbitrators to assess the implications of your unprecedented cooperation protocols." Riley looked around the command center, where human and Kithra personnel continued working together despite the approaching crisis. "How long do we have?" 30 minutes until the first aircraft arrive," Torres reported. "Vera, can the settlement speak for itself?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, can we demonstrate the effectiveness of integration simply by letting the observers see how it works?" "That is remarkably optimistic. It's also our only option." They spent the remaining time preparing presentations that focused on practical results rather than theoretical arguments. The settlement's construction progress, the efficiency improvements in both human and Kithra operations, and the successful resolution of the deep sleeper crisis all provided concrete evidence of partnership benefits. When the observers arrived, Riley was struck by the diversity of the group, not just human and Kithra officials, but representatives from multiple colonies and clan territories. Whatever decision emerged from this evaluation would clearly have implications far beyond Zirian 7. "Captain Hayes," said Admiral Morrison, arriving with the human delegation, "you've created quite a situation here." "Yes, sir. A successful one. That remains to be determined." The Kithra delegation was led by an elderly female whose bearing suggested significant authority. She approached Vera and spoke in the harmonic Kithra language, a conversation that sounded both formal and intense. "What is she saying?" Riley asked quietly. "She is asking whether I have forgotten what it means to be Kithra." "What's your answer?" "That I have discovered what it means to be more than Kithra." The evaluation process took 6 hours, during which the observers interviewed personnel, reviewed operational data, and toured the integrated settlement. Riley and Vera answered questions about everything from technical procedures to social integration challenges. "The efficiency improvements are undeniable," admitted Director Chen during the final assessment. "But the political implications of this level of integration are enormous." "What kind of implications?" Riley asked. "If human-alien partnerships become standard, it fundamentally changes humanity's approach to colonization and expansion." The Kithra elder spoke to the assembled group in careful human language. "The concern among our people is similar. If Kithra begin forming permanent bonds with other species, it challenges our cultural independence." "With respect," Vera said, "cultural independence has not prevented either of our species from facing extinction on hostile worlds. Partnership has." "That is one perspective," the elder replied. "It's the perspective of someone who has lived it," Riley added. "Every person in this settlement, human and Kithra, has survived challenges that would have defeated separate communities." Admiral Morrison reviewed the final reports on his tablet. "The operational results are impressive, Captain. But Earth Command needs assurance that this integration model can be replicated without compromising human interests." "Sir, what are human interests?" "Survival, prosperity, and expansion." "Then this model serves human interests perfectly. We've achieved all three through partnership rather than conquest." The Kithra elder approached Vera for a private conversation, speaking in low harmonic tones. Riley couldn't understand the words, but he could see the intensity of the discussion in their body language. Finally, Vera turned back to the assembled group. "The elder has informed me that the combined council will make their decision based on one final test." "What kind of test?" "Whether our integrated community can survive without support from either government. If we succeed as an independent settlement, it proves that partnership creates genuine strength. If we fail, it proves that interspecies cooperation is too unstable for broader implementation." "How long do we have?" 1 year. Admiral Morrison nodded. "Earth Command can accept those terms. If your settlement remains viable and productive after 1 year of independence, we'll consider broader implementation of integration protocols. And if we fail? Then both of you will face the consequences we discussed earlier." As the observers prepared to depart, Riley realized that they had won something unprecedented, the chance to prove that partnership could create something stronger than either species could achieve alone. But they had also committed to the highest stakes possible. "Vera," he said as they watched the aircraft disappear into the alien sky, "any regrets?" "None. But ask me again in a year. What happens now?" "Now we build something that has never existed before. A society based on partnership rather than hierarchy, cooperation rather than competition. And if we succeed? Then we change the galaxy." Riley looked around the settlement, where humans and Kithra continued working together with the natural efficiency that had impressed even skeptical observers. The next year would be challenging, but for the first time since arriving on Zirion 7, he felt genuinely optimistic about the future. "Well," he said, "at least we know the coffee will be excellent." Vera laughed, the sound carrying clearly across the alien landscape. "Among other things." As the twin suns set over their integrated community, Riley realized that he had not only tamed a savage planet but helped create a new model for interspecies cooperation. Whether it would succeed remained to be seen, but the attempt itself represented something revolutionary. And if it worked, both humans and Kithra would discover that the universe was much less lonely than either species had imagined.